Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Tuesday, Super Tuesday. Super Tuesday of the midterms, as a matter of fact. Super Tuesday for primaries in, I don't know, some number of states. Some super number of states around the country. And what did I say? I haven't finished the year yet, right? 2022, just for those keeping score at home. Midterm elections, that should have given it away, but who knows? We've been on the air for a million years, so you may be listening to tape one day in the far future. Historians will one day be listening to this podcast and saying, no wonder American society collapsed. And it wasn't even their fault. The actual collapse was driven by the other folks. But this is what was going on in the meantime, and it was no help. So, all right, well, I blame myself. But not really. I actually blame Tucker Carlson, and I actually blame, many of the other figures, of course, on the right. But I'd like to hang this around Tucker Carlson's neck for another day or two. Although they're doing an admirable job in the media, online, or the social media and traditional media, both doing a wonderful job moving on from hanging it around Tucker Carlson's neck to hanging it around the neck of the Murdoch family, where it does, in fact, belong. They are, in fact, the bosses, I think. I don't know whether Tucker Carlson actually regards them as his bosses or not. But anyway, it's not a long stretch, and you can probably hang them both for these infractions. So there's plenty of room, and we can always build a larger gallows on Wendy Rogers' instructions. It was her idea, folks, not mine. I'm just trying to appease them so that we can reach across the aisle and work together on things where we can find common ground. Okay. Well, many things to catch up on, of course, today. It is Tuesday, and it is I believe, the second week during which, the second week of Joan McCarter's leave of absence for the big move. I understand I'm very upset. We're not going to have an Idaho correspondent anymore. We'll have the same correspondent, but she won't be in Idaho anymore. So she moved, and that's what was taking up all the time. I mean, it's a big move. They're like up and leaving, then leaving the state at that. So it takes some time to get things settled and back in order. And as you know, sometimes you move to a country or a state where they don't have telephones or Skype or anything like that. Or at least it takes a while to set it up. I understand. So we'll miss her, but we were warned when we took off here at KITM headquarters to go and pick up the college boy. We knew that another 2 weeks would go by even after that before we get to speak to Joan again. Luckily, there's actually a lot of Idaho news today, or lots of stories about Idaho, and I think they all stem from one place. But it's interesting. Maybe we'll save it for later in the show when we would ordinarily be talking to Joan, or do we start off immediately with the Idaho news because I've teased it? And now, you're not going to be able to sit still knowing that there's Idaho news and not getting to it. Well, that describes, that's every day, really, basically. Isn't that how the show goes each day? Here's how today's show will go. Bill knows. He's in Portland, Maine. No moving plans, as far as I know, for the moment, unless it's, I guess, let's not kid ourselves, Bill. We're all getting to the point where it's time to start shopping for senior housing, right? No stairs or assisted living facility or something like that. I'd like to just move in now when it won't be so much trouble. Believe me, actually, when we were poking around for and shopping around for senior living situations for my wife's parents, I got to thinking, well, I don't know. I mean, they cook all your meals, They take care of the room and clean it up. It's kind of like living in a hotel these days. They really upscaled it. Maybe, some of these places are like, well, you got to be 55 or older. Okay, we got a couple of years to get ready. Maybe we should start packing some boxes now. The people always complain about the food, but I mean, you don't have to make it. That's pretty good. Pretty cushy. Super expensive, of course, so not really a great idea, but it has me thinking. They need something in between. where you can say, why put up with the hassle of moving? And it's already difficult enough to move. Why do it when you're 70, 80, 90 years old when you could take care of it when you're 50? And I don't know. We'll play Led Zeppelin and at the speakers at the shuffleboard if you need to be made comfortable. I'm sure they could, merge some amenities in there that the younger set would still like to have. We could put Pelotons in the exercise room. Will that entice you? I don't know. But anyway, the Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now, though we may not be alive forever. That's why we're talking about moving. But to stay on the edge of the hip and happening scene, see, Kagro X prefers you call it his radio non-fungible token. I do, actually. It might be worth millions of dollars, or it might have been worth millions of dollars at some point in the recent past, anyway. I don't know. Everything seems to have lost its value. It would have been fun to have been rich briefly, I guess. It never seems to go away. People who lose all their wealth in crypto or NFTs are still driving those Ferraris around somehow, I guess. I don't know. Nobody comes to collect them. But you might as well give it a try. Sometimes just declaring yourself to be hip, cool, and cutting edge is enough. I've worked for companies that have tried that in the past. And just like, for instance, let's just add .com or interactive to our name, and then we'll be worth millions of dollars more. It didn't work then. It won't work now. There's no way around the reality. Okay. Well, anyway, rather than depressing you with that news, let's depress you with other news. Things I've collected along the way. Wasn't sure where we would go this morning. Last night it kind of looked bleak. I had picked over most of the things that were in Pocket. But Pocket has filled itself back up again. Let's see. In COVID news, locally speaking, just to keep you up to date since you're all following now how Loudoun County is doing, slight increases in the last couple of days, up to 190 average number of cases over the last 7 days. So creeping up on 200. Pretty shortly we'll be over 200. And as you recall, it was only maybe 2 weeks ago that we were saying, going to get back over 100 or so, and we'll have doubled already since then. And you know how these mathematical progressions go, so keeping an eye on that. Lots of writing in the last couple of days on Twitter, threads from various docs who have been watching the pandemic as it happens. And I should probably wait until Greg comes back around tomorrow and Thursday before we discuss them, because I don't want to panic anybody. But there's a lot of Twitter docs writing speculatively, backed with some data and some concurrence of other doctors, of course, that we did mention the other day, and Greg gave his general agreement to the idea that we would likely face another winter wave at the end of this year because of waning efficacy of existing vaccines and the still lingering virus and its variants, etc. But I think perhaps even before then, we're looking at another one of these variants that's a subvariant of the Omicron that looks to be ready to come roaring back and spread itself around very quickly. Super contagious, this stuff. But luckily so far, the severity of illness, whether it's because of previous infection or vaccination or what have you, or maybe it's something just inherent in the variant, if we're lucky, the severity of the illness hasn't been all that worrisome. So that's good news. Meanwhile, in one particular corner of the world where they tend to do things kind of weird and backwards, North Korea is on the charts with COVID. Up to this point, they have been claiming zero COVID, and then they got it all at once. I guess that was the plan. But that's how it is in these command economies. I just happened to be doing the numbers last night and checking the daily charts internationally. And let me scroll and just get you the exact number. But all of a sudden, there was COVID in North Korea. And when I say there was COVID in North Korea, I mean like all of North Korea. Not really, but a lot of North Korea got it all at once. So I was doing the That first entry in, I guess one of the first entries in the nightly tweets. This is the most new cases of COVID reported for the day by the various countries doing reporting, whether it's reliable reporting or not. Not up to me. I can't decide. This is what's here. I go by Worldometers. That's that. But all of a sudden, rocketing to the number one spot internationally was North Korea. Out of nowhere, Cinderella story. Vaulting past the United States, which has put itself back on top of the nightly charts. It dips down during the weekends. Sometimes gets surpassed when there's a bad day in, Germany, Japan occasionally. But the United States would otherwise have been on top of the charts with 64,900, so nearly 65,000 new cases, which is a low number compared to the way it was during, the various spikes. So nothing terribly concerning, but it is back up. There was a time during the last couple of months when the United States had dropped off the nightly charts because everybody else was having a real problem and topping 100,000 cases daily. We've managed to get back on top, but that's just a matter of population. And, the outbreak doesn't seem to be at spike levels yet. But poor North Korea, I guess, people there are suffering. Vaults past us. So the chart reads North Korea, 392,930 cases. Number 2 being USA at 64,933. So 393,000 in North Korea, 65,000 in the United States, Taiwan with 62,000, Australia with 42,000, Japan with 35,000. So, the numbers aren't horrific in most places except North Korea. And I wasn't sure whether it was, this is all the COVID we've had throughout the pandemic and we're only just reporting it now, or we literally were at least claiming 0 cases of COVID until yesterday or so, and then all of a sudden 350, 400,000 cases all at once. So there are some write-ups about it. Axios isn't normally where I'd go for COVID news generally, or anything important that you need to know, more than why it matters. But it matters because a lot of people have COVID, but they've got it, and you don't have a great deal of choice. The market's not exactly flush with North Korea reporting. So anyway, it's there. And Axios says North Korea has had an explosive COVID outbreak, and here's the problem, 0% vaccination rate. Yeah, I guess they were, I don't know whether they were offered vaccine or not, but they opted not to take it because I don't know why. There's any number of crazy reasons here in this country why people don't take it. I don't know if North Korea buys into that stuff or it's just political in terms, well, it's political here too, but political in terms of we don't want Western capitalist imperialist vaccines, or we don't trust them. I don't know what it was. Who can tell? Who can say for sure? Axios attempts to do so. Let's see what they have to say. North Korea officially claimed 0 COVID cases until last Thursday. Great. Now, Pyongyang says 1.2 million people have feverish COVID-like symptoms. 50 people have died, and the entire country is under lockdown, which, to be frank, was the case before COVID. I mean, I don't know how you tell the difference between North Korea under lockdown and North Korea, but that's just me making a political judgment. Why it matters. People will die. Thank you. But here's what Axios says. North Korea has a 0% vaccination rate and meager health facilities, and it was already struggling to feed its population. Leader Kim Jong-un has called the outbreak the greatest turmoil since North Korea's founding, but he has yet to accept foreign assistance. Driving the news, at an emergency Politburo meeting on Sunday, Kim scolded officials for the irresponsible execution of the quarantine policy and blamed them for shortages of medicine, according to state media. He has started wearing a mask in public, so he's better than Trump in that sense. State media reported Thursday that some samples taken from symptomatic people in Pyongyang came back positive for a highly contagious Omicron subvariant. Since then, the number of fever cases, they enclose that in quotes, has ballooned to over 1 million. It would be impossible to verify the official figures even if North Korea had the capacity for mass testing, but Pyongyang has called the spread explosive. So they're admitting to that much. Between the lines, you know how they format their stories. All stories are like this at Axios. I think there's probably an effort here to, to get on top of the narrative and to show Kim is addressing this head on, while also pushing blame down the chain to the lower levels, said Jenny Town, director of the Stimson Center's 38 North program, which I guess is a North Korea-focused who knows what. We'll say think tank, because that's what people like to call themselves. State media has acknowledged the virus is spreading in Pyongyang, and it has probably hit some of the elites, she adds. An out-of-control virus is a nightmare scenario for the Kim regime and could be a deeply destabilizing event, says Victor Cha, Korea chair at the Center for Strategic and International Studies and a former U.S. official, senior U.S. official, not just some flunky, you know. How it happened, virus, but they say it longer. How it happened, North Korea responded to the pandemic as it did to Ebola, MERS, and SARS. They sealed their borders and waited for the pandemic to die off, says Ki Park, a neurosurgeon and lecturer at Harvard Medical School that works with pandemics that we react properly to and actually defeat. But when we surrender to it, it eventually will get, I guess, into North Korea as well. Severing most trade with neighboring China meant taking a major economic hit, and it put the North's ideology of, who knows how that's pronounced, Juche, 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 or self-reliance to the test. North Korean officials were highly confident until recently that the extreme zero-COVID policy was working, says Park, who has a license to practice in North Korea, has visited more than 20 times, and leads a program to support medical care there. There really was no need, in North Korea's eyes, to entertain external assistance, including the AstraZeneca vaccines offered by the COVAX initiative, he says. Now that the Omicron variant has breached their defenses and spread throughout much of the country, North Korea is ill-equipped to deal with it, Park says. Even at Pyongyang's top teaching hospital, there are perhaps only a dozen ventilators. Medical facilities outside the capital city are much more limited. North Korea does have two things going for it: a high number of doctors per capita, and a population that is accustomed to following orders from above, says a humanitarian worker with extensive experience in the country. But those doctors have limited training and no experience caring for COVID patients. Transportation is so poor. How poor is it? It's so poor that, particularly outside of Pyongyang, it will be difficult to get sick people to hospitals and clinics, especially during a lockdown, says the humanitarian source who requested anonymity due to the sensitivity of the issue. I shudder to think about a prolonged lockdown in North Korea. The human cost of that. The country's already food insecure, and what it means is we have to give them assistance immediately, says Park. In addition to vaccines and essential medications, North Korea will need food, the humanitarian source adds. We're coming into the lean season in North Korea with a drought there and almost no international support, so I'm very concerned. I wouldn't be surprised if there's at least a quiet call for assistance. Nothing announced publicly, but just done through their diplomatic channels over the next couple of weeks, the source says. There's a lot here for a North Korean story. Yes, but, it says, accepting international aid is always politically sensitive for North Korea, and officials could worry letting in people and supplies will also bring more cases. The Stimson Center's Town, that is the person's name, Town, says, I don't see them suddenly saying, oh, well, we have COVID now, so let's open everything up, back up, she says. I think there's still going to be an abundance of precaution. You rarely hear about that. Even if it's counterintuitive and possibly detrimental to the situation. North Korea is particularly unlikely to accept direct help from South Korea, which has offered to send vaccines, medical personnel, and other supplies. But the very public announcements about the severity of the situation could be a step toward accepting aid, the humanitarian source says, adding that the UN will likely be the key player in any such effort. Cha of CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, that says that in private communications with non-governmental organizations and medical groups, North Korea has expressed interest in mRNA vaccines, unlike my older son, who thinks he hates them, but has to get them anyway. What to watch? If North Korea does accept help from South Korea and the U.S., even indirectly through the UN, it would be interesting to see if this humanitarian effort would open up space for diplomacy on the nuclear issue, Cha adds. The WHO said Monday that it had not received any data from North Carolina. Well, probably not either. North Korea, though, it's easy to make the mistake. About the outbreak, but confirmed that the country had not begun vaccinations. So, not great. By the way, if North Korea were having terrible problems with food security and wanted free food and food aid from the rest of the world, a good way to do it, and a thing you could do, I suppose, in a society that tightly controlled, is say, all of a sudden we got COVID. And no, of course, you can't tour the hospitals to see how many people have the COVID. We have to lock those things down to prevent the spread to the rest of the country and to visitors, etc., blah, blah, blah. I mean, I guess you could fake the whole thing and then just receive huge shipments of aid and medicine, but whatever. I mean, we should be giving that aid anyway. They don't want it. I don't know. I mean, there's no reason to believe that they don't have COVID. It's impossible to believe at this point that it hasn't made its way into North Korea. But that just makes it a fantastic conspiracy theory instead. Okay. So there you go. Now you're up to date on what's happening in North Korea. Anyway, would you like to know? I guess we could move from North Korea. We could do North Korea to Idaho. Like, that's a smooth transition, right? I mean, we certainly could. Okay. I mean, I think that's unfair, but why not? Why not do it that way? I'll tease the story here. I know we're running up against the first break, but I have a story from HuffPost about this. I have a story from in-state sources, the Idaho Press, via Bill Scher, who tweets this about Idaho to give you a sense of what's going on there. Who'll win the Idaho Democratic gubernatorial primary today? I guess that's among the Super Tuesday primaries. Well, will it be the retired prison English teacher who's the only one on the ballot? Well, ordinarily that's a pretty good bet, but I guess that's not satisfying to the Democrats of Idaho. And by the way, I don't know. I imagine that Joan cast her ballot one last time in Idaho before leaving, but maybe not. I don't know. We'll have to ask her when she returns. I don't know. I don't know what the early voting situation in Idaho is. I mean, could be anything. Anyway, so will it be the retired prison English teacher who's the only one who managed to or bothered to put themselves on the ballot? Could it be the mayor of someplace, we'll figure out where, who is running a write-in campaign because he didn't realize that he was a registered Republican, which is a mistake you can sometimes make in Idaho. But thinking about, as many good people are who are registered Republicans, thinking about switching to become a Democrat, or will it be the racist write-in who's trying to hijack the party? Well, I mean, that could happen. Which party are they trying to hijack? The Democratic Party. They are also racists trying to hijack the Republican Party. It's a lot easier because people will just voluntarily climb into the vehicle or surrender to the hijackers. But it could easily enough be done on the Democratic side as well. All right, so let's see. Why don't we say that for the next couple minutes before the break, we'll back ourselves back out of this and go to the HuffPost coverage of, well, you know what? Actually, it kind of offers a different take on things. So maybe we'll jump over to the Idaho Press for their coverage. Dem race for governor takes unexpected twist. That would be the twist that now you expect it because we told you, Bill Scher told us what the twist was. It is illustrated by one photo here of Stephen Heidt, Heidt, the sole, registered and on the ballot Democratic candidate for governor, shown outside his home in Marsing, Marsing, and I hope I can't think of any weird way to pronounce that one, but Idaho could do anything. Let's see. With only an unassuming teacher from Marsing on the ballot and the presumed frontrunner who's been campaigning for months relegated to write-in status and joined there by a North Idaho disruptor described as an, quote, anti-Semitic troll. Well, that's the way it goes. The Idaho Democratic Party is in an odd spot in this year's race for governor. That's understating it, I think. Stephen Haidt, 61, an English as a second language teacher at Idaho's state prisons, had no idea he'd be the only Democrat on the ballot for governor when he filed his candidacy on the Thursday before the deadline, which was Friday, March 11th. On Monday, I had to go up north to Orofino, I'm guessing at that pronunciation, probably close, and visit the prisons up there, he said. Then his wife called and said 2 top Democratic Party state officials had stopped by the house. And they said, your husband was the only one that filed on the Democratic ticket. So I learned very third hand. Okay. I feel that the campaign is run, if the campaign is run properly, that I could actually win the election, he said. Sandpoint Mayor, there's the answer for that. Sandpoint Mayor Shelby Rogenstad, maybe Rognstad, announced his candidacy for governor as a Democrat back in November. But as we said, there was a small problem with that. He also filed to run on the final day of the filing period. The Idaho Secretary of State's office rejected his filing, though, because records showed he was a registered Republican. Well, my goodness. Rogenstad said he thought he'd switched back months before, but in March he announced he'd wage a write-in campaign. And you're going to have to write in his party, I guess, as well. So bring a pencil if you're getting ready to vote today.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or 2 would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm just, grabbing a couple other stories that might be fun to deal with after we deal with the emerging Idaho and North Korea situations. Of course, we left off having learned that Sandpoint, Idaho Mayor Shelby Rogenstad wanted to run as a Democrat, and I guess is trying to run as a Democrat in the primary for the gubernatorial nomination there, and is having to do so as a write-in because he was registered with the other party. But so is somebody else here. Soon after he found that out, David Riley, a failed Post Falls school board candidate and recent transplant to Idaho, notorious for his anti-Semitic, anti-gay, and anti-women writings and social media postings and his white nationalist leanings, also filed as a Democratic write-in for governor. Riley's school board bid drew national attention. I missed it, but okay. Maybe I didn't. Let's see what, if anything trips my memory here. And the national news website Daily Beast, I know them, labeled him an anti-Semitic troll. I'll take their word for it. Riley's new write-in campaign followed news of a far-right plot in North Idaho to infiltrate and take over the Kootenai, Kootenai, Kootnai, I need Joan here, Kootenai County Democratic Party, and install Riley as the new chairman and shunt Democratic funds to far-right GOP candidates and causes. That sounds rather insidious, and we'll probably look a little further into that one. There's a link to their own reporting on it. Sounds pretty intriguing, and I wonder whether it has anything to do with, it might not even be their own reporting on it, cdapress.com. And we'll see whether the HuffPost story takes us there as well. Let's see. In an InfoWars video posted on his campaign website, Riley rails against leftist extremist Democrats while calling current Idaho Republican officials scumbags. That's fun. Who he claims are on the take. Idaho Democratic Party Chair Lauren Nicochea. I'm guessing again at this pronunciation, and I'm sure we really need Joan here today. Necochea. Probably know one another, too. Said the party disavows Riley. David J. Riley and the hateful beliefs he has espoused for years have no place in our great state, much less the Idaho Democratic Party, she said in a March 28th statement, saying his words and actions contradict all the values we hold dear. By the way, I guess before I forget this thought, I just wanted to make this parallel. I think this is kind of an interesting thought. So again, the brief description of his plot here is, I don't know what the Democratic Party organization is in this particular county, which I may be mispronouncing, Kootenai. They might take a half a syllable out of that, probably. I'm guessing the way Western pronunciation is Kootenai or something like that. Anyway, I don't know what it's like. I don't know how easy it is to take over. But the plot here is, obviously, I'm an anti-Semitic troll, and I'm going to run, and nobody knows who's running for any of these boards. There are a couple of insiders who know who's who, but generally speaking, there's every opportunity to fool people into just electing me either by accident or bringing out Republican trolls who will register differently, cross over, and pretend to be Democrats, vote for me, make me chairman of the party, and then I am in control of the funds and the operations of the party, and I can simply direct them to, Republican candidates or myself, or steal them, or whatever the thought is. But I guess the idea was, install him as chairman and shunt Democratic funds to far-right GOP candidates and causes. Like, just use the power that you get by virtue of having been accidentally or misleadingly anyway elected chair, and just say, the decision of the Democratic Party is to spend money on Republican candidates from now on. And you would have to you sit there and say, well, the rules say that the chairman and maybe whoever else, and if they have enough control, the rules say that they can do this. We just never really contemplated anybody would, because whatever. It's actually quite an interesting and insidious plot, and it's not unrelated to other news and other Republican practices. I was saying this morning because I saw another Republican candidate. They weren't really insinuating that they were doing the same thing. It was a conclusion that I drew. But here, this is an even better conclusion. Or a better comparison to Trumpism. Now, not only is the whole Republican Party now enthralled to Donald Trump and doing the things he does and buying into the ultra-right ideologies, etc., but like Donald Trump, there are now multiple candidates at multiple levels running for office on the theory that if I can capture this office, I can either decriminalize the things I normally do, or I can do new crimes with cover. I'll give myself permission, or make the voters give me permission to commit this crime and make it a not crime by virtue of the election I've won. And that's certainly Donald Trump's theory of the presidency, and it's becoming everybody else's theory as well, including, what's her name, Kathy Barnett, who's running for Senate in Pennsylvania. I don't know whether there's any crimes you could charge her with necessarily, but it's, I guess, come to our attention recently that she was present on January 6th at the Capitol. She claims she was just milling about outside, not doing anything in particular, but the video evidence is that she was hanging out with the Proud Boys, but I don't know if there's any evidence that she was actually inside the building. And that's the big differentiation point. People who didn't go into the building now say, I really was just a tourist, even though the tourists' idea is to go into the building ordinarily, like actual tourists, not just walk around the outside of it. But okay. Anyway, that's the way that they think that they'll get away with, not being arrested for this stuff. But, it's starting to look like there are a number of Republican candidates who are like, well, if that's a crime, one thing I could do is run for Senate, where I can vote to not hold myself or other people like me liable for having done this thing on January 6th. So anyway, it's an intricate plot. Now back to the Idaho press, talking more about David Riley, the fake candidate or the fake Democrat running for governor in Idaho. Where were we? Yes. Asked what all this means for Idaho Democrats in the governor's race, Nicosia, whose name I'm doubtless mangling, said, it means that things are still kind of wide open. We always want Democrats to have more choices. We welcome any legitimate Democrat who wants to run. Obviously, David Riley doesn't fit that description. And we believe in keeping our primaries open and letting the process play out and letting the voters decide. I think that contrasts to the Republican Party, where we're seeing local party bosses either make donations or endorsements in the Republican primary, she said. Regarding Rogenstad's write-in campaign, she said, we consider this a contested primary, since he's officially registered as a write-in, and so the party office is neutral. We're treating this the way we would treat it if he were on the ballot, and we're not running as a write-in. So he still has access to all the same things that the other legitimate Democratic candidate does. That candidate, Haidt, is gearing up for something fairly unexpected, a real campaign. Michelle Vincent, the chair of the Elmore County Democratic Party, has signed on to be his interim campaign manager until he gears up further after the primary. He is fully committed to running a very strong campaign, Vincent told the Idaho Press. Very strong. Some proof. Haidt gave his 2 weeks' notice on his beloved job teaching in the Idaho prisons, where he taught both English as a second language and GED classes for 14 years, and will soon be officially unemployed, though it's still 2 years before his planned retirement date, which was scheduled for August of 2024. That's because being a state employee posed legal conflicts with running for governor. I'm not a career politician. In fact, I'm 2 years out of retiring myself, he said. As of April 29th, Haidt will be out of a job and free to speak his mind on politics. I love my job, he said, but it was on the job that he was inspired to run for office, something he's actually done 3 times before, though those were all Republican bids for Congress in Utah and Washington 3 decades ago that didn't go far. Since then, his political journey has led him to become an independent. Then, 5 years ago, at the urging of his staunchly Democratic dad, go dad, to register as a Democrat. I didn't really have any intention of running again, he said. Politics kind of turned me off. After doing a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints mission in Brazil in his youth, Haidt became fluent in Portuguese and returned to travel and live in South America for several years. That's where he met his wife, and his children all have dual Portuguese and American citizenship. Since then, while teaching English as a second language, Haidt has learned Spanish from his students and how to teach English to those who speak other languages as well. At the prisons, Haidt employs teaching assistants who are inmates, and they work hard for a paltry wage of about 40 cents an hour. They're all grown men, he said. They have crimes that scan the board. I think we mean span, perhaps. But anyway, some of them are going to be there for a long time. Most of them are bilingual. He's had teaching assistants who speak everything from Spanish to Japanese to Korean. Good, you could send them to North Korea to help with the COVID pandemic. He looks for inmates who speak 2 languages and have college degrees because they're best able to teach English as a second language. Many quit the job after a week or so, but a handful have stuck around for the past 5 years. Well, all very interesting, but less about the political situation, I guess. Haidt himself, a fascinating figure. I encourage you to return to the Idaho Press's coverage and read more about it. Now I'm actually kind of interested in scrolling back and reading more about the crazy plot in North Idaho to take over the Kootenai Democratic Party. The story is in the Coeur d'Alene, and I'm probably mispronouncing that too. But I mean, I know that's close, but probably hasn't got the nuance of Idaho pronunciation. But the Coeur d'Alene Post Falls Press. Obviously, by the way, I realized in reading through the text of the Idaho Press story that it was not an old story, but not current. April 16th was the date on that one. This, a story from March 31st of this year, under the headline, Anonymous No Longer. Let's find out what this is about. Kay Thornbrough, I don't know, Thorn, B-R-U-G-H. I'm having a lot of trouble with all the pronunciations in Idaho today. A woman who said the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee tried to recruit her. This is the actual Republican organization behind this. Tried to recruit her as part of an alleged plan to infiltrate and dismantle the local Democratic Party, is now speaking publicly. And here's where I would want to ask Joan, is that like, you know, a necessary goal? Like in Kootenai County, like, could you just say, well, what if we don't dismantle the Democratic Party? Won't we pretty much kick their butts anyway with Republicans here in this county? But maybe it's close. Maybe it's one of those counties where there's a significant Democratic presence. I really don't know. But at any rate, it's some plot. The press published in early March a recorded phone call between Kootenai County resident John Grimm and the person he identified as KCRCC Youth Chair Dan Bell. In the call, Bell described the plan by the KCRCC, Kootenai County Republican Central Committee, to take control of the local Democratic Party by having its own candidates run for Democratic precinct captain positions. The press reached out to Bell by phone and email on Wednesday. I mean, these are probably jobs you can win with like 20 votes. So it's doable. I mean, it's quite, you know, one of those evil genius plots. Quite brilliant, really. The man who answered the phone, of course, refused to identify himself, paused to check if Bell was available, and then said Bell was not there. Penelope Harries Morris, a paralegal, told the press in early March that Greg McKenzie approached her at a KCRCC meeting and tried to recruit her for what she called a, quote, scheme. It is a scheme to infiltrate the Democratic Party. McKenzie was elected to the North Idaho College Board of Trustees in 2020 after KCRCC recommended him. He asked if I was willing to register as a Democrat, Morris said. By the way, you should kick him off the College Board of Trustees now if this is true. You should investigate it and look to kick him off. You can't have a person on a Board of Trustees. He's not very trusty, is he? If that's the case. Anyway, she said she was confused by the question. That is, are you willing to register as a Democrat? Until McKenzie explained the KCRCC's plan to fill the local Democratic Party's ranks with their own members. When Morris refused to participate, she said McKenzie asked if she would be willing to recruit other volunteers instead. She said she declined. In an email to the press earlier this month, McKenzie said he did not recall the conversation, like Marjorie Taylor Greene. He also said he believes the press is working with local Democrats to have Democrats change their party affiliation in order to vote in the Republican primary. Again, you know, why don't we just accuse them of what we're doing? And maybe they actually believed that was happening, but it wouldn't be surprised if it really wasn't, and their own paranoia drove them to do this. Anyway, Morris said on Wednesday that McKenzie's denial didn't surprise her. I don't think he thought anything was wrong with it, she said. Though she initially did not wish to be identified, Morris said she now feels compelled to step forward and speak about her experiences. I'm bowled over by this nastiness and dirtiness, she said. Morris, who has lived in Kootenai County for almost 7 years, belongs to the Kootenai County Republican Women Federated. But she said the local GOP, remember that, doesn't resemble the Republican Party she grew up with. Some conservatives involved in local politics are hypnotized by the KCRCC's rhetoric and don't question it. Morris said. They're so mesmerized and they're under the thumb of the the party organization, that they have no freedom, she said. They just don't know it. They're walking the line. They're in lockstep. If the takeover effort succeeded, Bell said KCRCC plants would vote David J. Riley in as party chair. A guy that they call racist, anti-Semitic Holocaust denier, Bell said. That same guy would be the chair of the Kootenai Democratic Party. A recent Pennsylvania transplant, Riley was condemned by the nation's largest pro-Israel organizations for his anti-Semitic writings and called an anti-Semitic troll by the Daily Beast. Riley, whose social media posts included comments that, quote, all Jews are dangerous and that more Americans should believe anti-Semitic stereotypes, ran unsuccessfully for a seat on the Post Falls School Board last year. The KCRCC recommended him as a candidate, the local GOP's version of an endorsement, and stood by that recommendation as national criticism poured in. Riley registered as a Democrat this month and filed for a Democratic precinct captain position. He also joined Idaho's gubernatorial race as a write-in candidate this week, aiming to make Democrats conservative again. Riley told the press he got the idea from Democrats who changed their party affiliation in order to vote in Idaho's closed Republican primary races. Idaho had an open primary system until 2011, when the Idaho GOP successfully sued the state to close the party's primary. Since then, some left-leaning voters have changed their party affiliation to Republican in order to vote in GOP primaries. Laura Tennyson, a former chair of the Kootenai Democrats, is one of them. She reportedly registered as a Republican in 2020. She told the Spokesman Review in February she's still aligned with the Democratic Party's platform, but wanted to have a say in races that are essentially decided in the Republican primary. And in a state like Idaho, that's probably quite a few of them. Kootenai Democrats chair Evan Koch, or Koch, depending on how you pronounce it. He probably doesn't want to go with the Koch, like Koch brothers pronunciation, but who knows. He said the local Democratic Party does not encourage its members to change their affiliation in order to vote in Republican primaries, though he is aware that some Democrats make the switch. Riley isn't the only North Idaho candidate who recently changed his affiliation. There's also the mention of Shelby Rogenstad. We found out about him in the last article. I don't know. I guess that's sort of the end of the real drama about this. But there's some thoughts about what Riley was hoping to do about redirecting the money. If elected as precinct captain and voted in as party chair, Riley said he would use his position to halt Democratic operations for at least 2 years when the next primary election occurs, and funnel money donated to Democrats toward Republicans. Riley said he'd give half the local Democratic Party's funds to the Kootenai County Republican Women Federated to help get more women involved in politics. He's very progressive, see? The remaining funds would go to the Catholic Church as reparations for the sin of abortion versus reparations going the other way for the sin of child molestation and the cover-up of it, but okay. Riley said any subsequent donations to the Democratic Party would be clearly marked as going toward conservative causes and candidates. It's not like a scheme, he said. It's not like a dirty trick. I guess in some sense that's actually true if he's being open about it. But it is actually still kind of a dirty trick because no one's really expecting that to happen. Riley said he sees himself, by the way, as bolstering democracy in North Idaho by spurring others to get involved in local politics. I see this as a big win for the Democratic Party. Wow. Pretty interesting. Let's see. What can you do? You should read on in this, but I think I'll jump out of the rest of this thing and skip over to see what's going on from a different angle, a larger picture of things. From Huffington, or no longer Huffington, but HuffPost, who had, this interesting bit. We'll use this to take us to the top of the hour here. Living with the far-right insurgency in Idaho. A radical pop-up ad has gotten in the way of things. A radical GOP faction, in open alliance with extremists, is seizing power and targeting its opponents with cruelty. Some wonder, is it time to leave? Christopher Matthias has the byline on this one. Let's take a quick look at this angle on things. White nationalist Vincent James Fox, 2 X's in that if you want to look him up, had a new video for his nearly 70,000 subscribers on BitChute, one of the few tech platforms that hasn't banned him. On February 16th, he appeared wearing a baseball hat emblazoned with the state's outline tilted on its side so that it resembled a pistol. Because, yum, guns, right? Okay. By the way, this is a current article, piece datelined today, the 17th. We are going to take over this state, Fox declared. We have a great, large group of people, and that group is growing. A true, actual right-wing takeover is happening right now in the state of Idaho, and there's nothing that these people can do about it. So, if you're a legislator here, either get in line or get out of the way. Fox, 36, isn't from Idaho. He's only recently moved here from California to Post Falls, which is where the other guy who came from Pennsylvania, Riley, ended up too. So I guess that means something. But in the video, he showed off photos of himself posing with a string of prominent Republican politicians in the state as he explained who he's supporting in the upcoming primaries slated for today, May 17th. He was especially excited about a selfie he'd taken a week prior. It showed him and fellow white nationalist Dave Riley, a recent Pennsylvania transplant also living in Post Falls, standing alongside Idaho's Lieutenant Governor, Janice McGeachin. Or what was her? We learned something about the way she pronounces that name. It's spelled like McGeachin, Geachin, but wasn't it like McGeachin or McGick? I can't remember what it was. But Joan pronounced, I guess, correctly once or twice on the show. But it's been like 100 years. But anyway, you know, she's the crazy lady who every time the actual governor would leave the state would declare herself not only governor, which she was acting governor, but he also, yes, okay. I say that like I interrupted myself or surprised myself with my own sound effect. That was good acting there, by the way. Acting, right, I knew it. Anyway, she's the one that, issues executive orders when he's out of the state. And I did it twice. I don't know why he ever left the state again, but anyway, so Janice McGeachin, I don't remember what it was, but McGeachin, I guess. Anyway, all three were smiling. That's what you do in a photograph. We're supporting her, Fox said, bragging of his movement's deep connections to McGeachin, whom former President Donald Trump endorsed in the GOP primary race for governor. Fox then explained how this particular brand of Christian white nationalism is poised to conquer Idaho and then the country. The solution is local politics. So you're getting to see what's going on here. Amassing power in these pockets of the country until it's time to unify, he said. I've only been here for a couple of months and I'm tapped in the way that I am. You can do it too. Well, you can do it in states where there's small populations and very little participation, certainly in the Democratic Party in those areas. But there's not even a lot of, just not a lot of people in general in Idaho versus the rest of the country. But it does highlight what you can do in a state with a very small population. I semi-joke about it all the time, but Democrats could do this. Republicans are managing somehow to, it's a little easier to take over things as a Republican in a Republican state like that, moving to a low population corner of the state. But again, places like, every time we lament that places like Wyoming, and for that matter, Idaho, I guess, North Dakota, South Dakota, Montana, etc., the very low population states, have got the same number of senators, two votes in the Senate, just like everybody else, California, New York, Texas, Florida, whatever. But that a relatively small number of Democrats, if they organized, could move to these states and be influential, take those Senate seats. There's 8 to 10 Senate seats out there up for grabs that I would say, under 1 million people. It's not like I can organize 1 million people at the drop of a hat or anything, but it wouldn't take that much. You would never notice 1 million people leaving California. 1 million Democrats even leaving California still doesn't make elections in that state close. Distribute them around the Dakotas, Montana, Wyoming, even Idaho, etc., and you could color those races and change them blue. You really could. And like I said, you could lock in another 8 to 10 Democrats in the Senate and get to, well, you could put yourself in position to have 60 votes in the Senate if you never ever get around to fixing the filibuster. You could fix it this way. It would take an enormous amount of organization and an enormous amount of money. You'd have to uproot people who are used to living a cosmopolitan lifestyle, if you will, and move them into a place that doesn't offer that option for many people, or doesn't make it comfortable or easy to do it if you want to live that way. Not that they're without their comforts. All of the pop-up ads on the in the article we were reading before were for Boise's Best Poke at some delicious seafood restaurant or another. So, they've got these things, and Joan can tell you all about it, even though she left. But okay, she could tell. She knows very well what's there and what's on offer. But she may also know very well why it might be a good reason to leave. I don't know. But at any rate, you could be doing this. Wouldn't that be something? That would frustrate the hell out of Republicans, and they would call it a dirty trick. In the meantime, though, they're doing this, and we're doing nothing. All right. Well, it would cost a lot of money. You'd have to move people there. You'd have to give them employment, provide them with housing. It wouldn't be free. So it's not easy. And these guys are willing to do it because they could. They can go and get a local job and be perfectly happy. And, you could too, I suppose. But we'd have to create a lot more jobs for you there. But they're right. The solution is local politics, amassing power in these pockets of the country until it's time to unify. Fascists like Fox are famous fabulists. Wow. Experts at exaggerating their influence and success. But Fox wasn't just talking bleep. I'll bleep myself there so that we don't have to do it later. It's a lot of work to have to go back in and edit these things. He is one of many far-right activists who have flocked, I don't have to bleep that, to Idaho in recent years, where a large and growing radical MAGA faction in the state's Republican Party has openly allied itself with extremists to a shocking extent, even for the Trump era. This faction is accruing more and more power in Boise, the state capital. Imagine a state house full of Marjorie Taylor Greenes and Steve Kings. At the local level, they've seized seats on school boards and county commissions at a fast clip. Watch out. We'll return after this. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I'm scanning this HuffPost article, and at the same time as I am realizing, wow, this actually could take up the rest of the show, I'm similarly moved to do it anyway because it's quite scary stuff. Let me see if I can give you a flavor, at least, for the rest of what's going on. So as we jumped out for the break, let's see, we just mentioned that they were seizing seats on school boards and county commissions at a fast clip. They've accomplished this in part by targeting their opponents with frightening cruelty and harassment, embracing a strategy called confrontational politics. I mean, it's not like a great name there or anything. It is confrontational politics, but they actually call the strategy confrontational politics, I guess, which has helped drive more moderate officials across the state to resign or retire. So this is actually, quite worrisome. Here's the hat that they were describing, by the way, on Fox's head. I guess the Idaho on its side, so that it looks like a pistol, but there's even a little pine tree bullet being fired out of the pistol. Ooh, just in case you missed out on what it was there. But I'm curious to know about whether or not or there's any connection between these guys and the Marjorie Taylor Greenes of the world, but specifically the one we're talking about, Marjorie Taylor Greene herself, because I'll have to dig this up, but my understanding was that there were at least some rumors that she really kind of won her seat by being the last one standing in a campaign that featured some real, made-for-TV, movie of the week kind of stuff about, which sometimes has, a basis in reality of, the town bully, running the place in such a way that she's somehow got henchmen that run around and intimidate others into doing things her way, including voting to put her in Congress. And she certainly harassed and intimidated the Democratic nominee out of the state. But my recollection is that she may have frightened some Republican rivals out of the primary this way as well. And that seems to be the overt plan of these guys up in Idaho. If you're up there and the area is deep ruby red and you have lunatic local police as well, then who's going to arrest you for making terroristic threats against the rest of the field and thereby clearing it and winning election, and then legitimizing all of the criminal activity that led you there? It's just another version of running for office to clear yourself. I'll gain elective office through criminal activity, and then when I get there, I'll use it to excuse/pardon myself to the extent I can, or at least to give myself cover or convince people not to prosecute me for what I have done in this time. Because now, of course, the local police are dependent for their salaries and continuing in their job, and want to, politically have good relations with the Republican elected officials in the area anyway. So sure, I'll do you that favor. No, there won't be any case against you for the crimes you committed in order to get this job. Yikes. Well, anyway, I wonder also, there's a linked article here to back to the Idaho Statesman, linked in the HuffPost here, when I say that the confrontational politics has helped drive more moderate officials across the state to resign or retire. I guess there's an example here, perhaps, in the linked story, although the Idaho Statesman, I guess, is paywalled. Were we in that before, when they're just getting tired of us reading their articles for free? I don't know. So let's continue with the HuffPost here. A lot has been written about both the radicalization of the Republican Party and the decline of democracy in the U.S., about the country being at a precipice. It's maybe easy for those warnings to become background noise, or to dismiss them as doom-mongering pieces of clickbait. It gets that way. So that's why we'll give you this fresh angle from HuffPost on the show today. But in Idaho, the nightmare scenario is crossing into reality as an authoritarian GOP, I love it, got to remember to say it, even though it's awkward and weird, an authoritarian GOP sets about to create a whiter Christian nation. These MAGA radicals have gestured at the future they want. No rape and incest exceptions to Idaho's abortion ban. No emergency contraception. No gender-affirming health care for minors. No, of course, the banning of books, jailing of librarians, why not? And maybe no public education altogether. But you'd have to be crazy to want that, right? Well, guess what? I recently spent a week traveling across the state, from Sand Point in the northern panhandle down through the green slopes and white water of Hell's Canyon to the plains of Ada County. Do I have that right? Ada. And then across Lava Rock and Sagebrush to Blackfoot. In all these places, Democrats and even moderate Republicans view Tuesday's primaries as an existential affair. Some are considering leaving the state if MAGA extremists consolidate more power. Others are digging in their heels. The people I talked to were not all that accustomed to alarmism, which made it striking to hear some of their voices tremble when they talked about what's happening to their home. Their message for the rest of the country: it's going to get bad. The GOP really will go that far. And, well, there's some photos illustrating the piece that tend to argue for that. Next section, a very extreme Republican county committee. But before we get to the pictures, let's see. There's some people hanging out at some street festival, walking around with their shirts off, showing their tattoos, and carrying a Nazi flag. There is, it's all, I guess, described here. Aryan Nations demonstrators marching through the streets of Coeur d'Alene with a Nazi flag. Also up here, portrait of an unidentified man at the Aryan Nations compound in Hayden Lake, Idaho, in April of 1992, standing outside of a building with the sign that says "Whites Only," and it has a little cross in the O. It is the Church of Jesus Christ Christian Aryan Nations. Pastor Richard G. Butler presiding, I guess, and then photo of the guy in quasi-uniform standing outside. What else have we got here? A masked armed guard with a semi-automatic rifle patrolling outside a news conference as Aryan Nations convenes in Hayden Lake from 1986, and then some photos of their former compound. Anyway, the heading of the next section, again, a very extreme Republican county committee. Let's find out which one we're talking about here. Right-wing extremists have long been attracted to Idaho, drawn to its abundant land, lack of racial diversity. The state's now 93% white. And libertarian brand of conservative politics, I'm sure now more gimmitarian than anything else. But according to longtime residents like Sean Keenan, a local Democratic activist, the degree to which extremists are not only flocking here today, but finding a home in the GOP feels different. Could be different in other states for Democrats. I talked to Keenan in Coeur d'Alene, a fast-growing city of 50,000, nestled in the Rockies, at a lakeside park downtown, the same place he remembers neo-Nazis in the 1990s marching around trying to recruit blue-eyed, blonde-haired boys like me to join their Aryan cult. Keenan was referring, of course, to the Aryan Nations, the white supremacist group that had a large, sprawling compound near here up by Hayden Lake. In 1998, members of the group opened fire on and then viciously beat Keenan's aunt and cousin, Victoria and Jason Keenan, both of whom are Native American, after they stopped their car near the compound. A Southern Poverty Law Center funded lawsuit stemming from the attack eventually bankrupted the Aryan Nations. Keenan's aunt, fearing reprisal, fled the area. Back then, Keenan says, he remembers there being some bipartisan opposition to the Aryan Nations, which had terrorized the community for years, the local bully scenario I was telling you about. It was really easy for the community to organize against that, and you had a lot of buy-in from just about every single business owner downtown. All of the city council, were locked arm in arm on this, he said, and it was fairly unified. Not so much anymore, Keenan said. Sure, the Aryan Nations is gone, its 20-acre compound in ruins, but what does that matter when the local GOP is endorsing white supremacists? On November 2nd, 2021, Fox told his 44,000 followers on Telegram that, quote, if school board races go well in North Idaho, I will be running for something local there soon, and I will win easily. Fox's dream of public office has already been pursued by his friend Dave Riley, a fellow white nationalist who, despite saying all Jews are dangerous and having attended the deadly neo-Nazi rally in Charlottesville, Virginia, in 2017, was endorsed last year by the Kootenai County Republican Central Committee for School Board in Post Falls. You know all about that. Even after the endorsement drew negative media coverage, they didn't back down. Let's see. I believe Dave is a good man who will make an excellent trustee and will resist the progressive Marxist indoctrination of our children. Brent Regan, the committee's chairman, wrote in a statement. Riley didn't win the school board seat, by the way, in Post Falls, but he performed pretty well for a guy who was in Charlottesville in 2017, winning 47% of nearly 2,000 votes. Regan has been at the center of the Idaho GOP's radicalization, at his perch atop the KCRCC and as chair of the board of the Idaho Freedom Foundation, an influential statewide group. Both organizations have staked out far-right positions. They then demand that conservatives embrace or else be labeled a rhino. Regan has also repeatedly embraced noxious extremist groups and figures, like in 2019, when he led the KCRCC in passing a resolution asking the federal government to allow Austrian white nationalist Martin Sellner, who has close ties to the man who massacred 50 Muslims in New Zealand, to enter the country so that he could marry his fiancée, a North Idaho-based alt-right influencer. Yuck. Last summer, the KCRCC unanimously passed another resolution affirming its total support for the John Birch Society, the conspiratorial anti-communist organization that is, in many ways, the antecedent to QAnon and whose founder once declared that democracy is a fraud. Fox, who was at the January 6th Stop the Steal rally in Washington, D.C., has been a big name in white supremacist circles for years now. He was the founder of the alt-right media collective known as Red Elephants. That went far, I guess. Worked as chief propagandist for a violent fascist fight club and is a prominent figure in the America First Groyper movement. Remember them from yesterday? That reminds me, I have an extra piece that I need to tell you about from that reading yesterday. He's rubbed shoulders with the who's who of prominent racists, appearing on podcasts to talk about Jewish control of the media, deny the Holocaust, or riff about the low IQ scores of non-whites. The Buffalo shooter, he says, did something crazy and immoral, but was right about white replacement, Fox wrote on Sunday after an 18-year-old white, you know the story, what happened, of course, and the great replacement conspiracy theory that drove it over the weekend. In a statement to HuffPost, Reagan claimed to have never met Fox. I do not recall him attending any of the KCRCC meetings, he said. In February, however, Fox and Riley posted photos of themselves smiling at their annual Lincoln Day dinner with guest speaker Dinesh D'Souza. Reagan was also a speaker at the event. In almost any place in the country, Fox would have no chance of being elected to anything. But here, the party infrastructure could not only allow it, but encourage it. They have completely rebranded what it is to be conservative here in North Idaho, Keenan said of the KCRCC, and they have literally excommunicated and cleaned house of any rational, regular conservative from their ranks, telling them, you don't belong here. You have not passed the purity test. It's a bit of a purge, a big purge. This radicalization accelerated in the last 5 years, Keenan said, pointing to a series of events, Trump's election, the pandemic, and the nationwide anti-racist uprisings of 2020 as mobilizing the far right here to such a scary extent that he wonders whether it's time to get out of Idaho. Some of his friends already have. There was a week when armed militias patrolled the streets with assault rifles in search of Black Lives Matter and Antifa activists. Anti-maskers shut down a school board meeting. COVID-19 denialists harassed hospital workers. And bigots, some of them armed, harangued children at Rainbow Squad LGBTQ events at the local library. Every single day, I wake up and I do this debate in my head. Do I move or do I stay? Keenan said, briefly breaking down in tears. Every day. So I guess maybe it's an indication of how hopeful I am. Now, next section here, I'll just maybe start to give you some section headings to give you some idea of what there is left to read here. The next section is a deep desire to dominate without mercy. That doesn't sound very good. Wow. As a matter of fact, I don't know. Maybe I feel like I should read some of these things. The next section after that, maybe I'll give you the section headings and see if we're motivated to read on. Actually, these headings are rather huge. There's the purge, which I guess was about the people that they kicked out of the party. Just continuing to scroll down. A lot of it is photos, too, but it's an enormous piece. Is there another? Let's see. Confrontational politics and a cry for help. Illustrated here with a picture of Idaho State Representative Greg Chaney, Chaney, at the Idaho State Capitol on the last day of the legislative session on March 31st, 2022 in Boise. And at right, a close-up of the gun that he carries with him to work every day there in the state capitol. I'm sure he's constantly having to shoot at criminals inside the Capitol building. All right. There's more. There's mention and a picture of Ammon Bundy is in here as well. Lots of the pictures of the books that they want to ban. I mean, this is an enormous piece, and it will go on forever, and I don't even know if we'd finish it, even if we just read straight on. But there's a whole lot. I'm kind of interested in that first section heading, though, illustrated by a picture of the lieutenant governor here. A deep desire to dominate without mercy. I'll read a little bit more here. On February 25th, white nationalists stopped me, that would be the writer of the piece, from entering the third annual America First Political Action Conference in Orlando, Florida. No reporters allowed, they said. Hey, the homosexual conference is that way, quipped, well, barely a quip, one attendee, a YouTuber arrested last year for attacking media during the insurrection. Back at my hotel, I watched the AFPAC live stream, waiting to find out which GOP politicians would appear, lending the imprimatur of their office to this gathering of young America First fascists who call themselves groypers. Among the 5 Republican officials who spoke was here's the pronunciation guide. McGeehan. There's no CH sound. It's just McGeehan. Okay. Idaho's lieutenant governor. Thanks for the pronunciation guide. Thank you. I know it's probably killing Joan. She's probably actually, if she's listening at all, I know she's got a lot of work to do here. She'd probably be tweeting to me now. It's McGeehan, but she's too busy at the moment. Keep up the good work fighting for the country, she told the crowd in a pre-recorded video. Other speakers at AFPAC then praised Adolf Hitler and called for Dr. Anthony Fauci to be hanged. Let's see, praising Adolf Hitler would probably be Nick Fuentes. Maybe he also did the Fauci hanging thing as well. Who knows? Fox gave a fiery speech too. We must have a deep desire to dominate without mercy, he howled. And if you refuse to dominate, then America First will dominate you. Responding to backlash over her AFPAC appearance back in Boise, McGeehan admitted in an interview with KTVB that she'd heard of Fox and, yes, had taken a photo with him. She then quickly pivoted to accusing the media of playing a game of guilt by association. Yeah, I remember that article now that I think about it. Okay. Now that rings a bell. Let's see. She was less defensive, though, 3 weeks later when she appeared on the far-right podcast, telling the host she was well aware of what AFPAC was all about, adding defiantly, I'm not going to back off from the opportunity to talk to other conservatives across the country. This never punch right attitude has defined McGeehan's chaotic tenure as Idaho's lieutenant governor since her election in 2019. McGeehan, a former state representative who owns an Irish pub in Idaho Falls, has routinely allied herself with some of the most extreme right-wing figures in America, and then, when pressed about those associations, has refused to apologize. When I requested McGeehan comment for this story, she responded by posting a screenshot of my email on Twitter. Sounds like unbiased journalism to me, she wrote, adding a crying, laughing emoji. Her extremism has endeared her to the Idaho Freedom Foundation, a powerful dark money organization receiving bundles of donations from out-of-state billionaires. The group's stated mission is exposing, defeating, and replacing the state's socialist public policies, which in practice has meant pushing a vision of government so limited as to make Idaho the Wild West again. But again, by the way, backed by money, bundles of donations from out-of-state billionaires, they're able to re-engineer the politics of the entire state. It can be done. It is being done now, naturally being done by Republicans. Could it be done by Democrats in 5 states pretty easily? Using only people from California? Yes. Using people from any other state? Yes. It could absolutely be done. There's a huge excess Democratic voting population in a lot of these states. You see what the popular vote totals are for president and for statewide office in California and New York. Move them. Put them up there. Where's the billionaire Democrats to put people up there and to do this? And it's 10 Senate seats in this. No bigger payoff possible. Hell, do it for corrupt reasons, to cut your own taxes. Jeff Bezos, go ahead. Go for it. I mean, be sorry I endorsed this, but I'm saying right now that I'm sorry already. But you could see how it could work. Well, anyway, I might stop with this at this point just to give you some idea of what's going on and how disconcerting it is, although how available the very same tactic is to us and what a difference it would make to put 10 Democratic Senate seats in our hands. But, no interest for whatever reason. Can't get anybody interested in this one. All right, so let's see. I mentioned that there was something I wanted to jump back to yesterday's article about the groypers for. That, too, I kind of ran out of time to read, and maybe you went back and read it yourself, but if you didn't, I mentioned at the outset that Milo Yiannopoulos had found himself a platform again through this Groyper movement, and I wanted to illustrate how and to what extent and who else is involved in this. Let's see. So I got to skip on down to where we left off, if I can remember exactly where that was. Let's see. When we were talking about Church Militant, right, which I never really understood exactly what that organization actually is or what form it takes here, but let's see. In a parallel project, Church Militant also seeks to transform mainstream Catholicism from its rightward flank. Just 2 weeks ago, Church Militant made national news for its hour-long interview with Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, in which the Georgia Congresswoman suggested that Satan is controlling the Catholic Church. Remember this one? Mostly because of Catholic support for refugees at the U.S. southern border. While it might seem odd for a Catholic media site to celebrate such a charge coming from an evangelical Protestant, although she is now anyway, Church Militant titled the first segment of its week-long promotion of the interview, Marjorie for Pope. The outlet has long waged a vitriolic campaign against the church's current hierarchy, which it derides as both milquetoast and liberal, and an international crime syndicate run by a lavender mafia. By comparison, Church Militant presents itself as the home of authentically Orthodox Catholicism, even as the Archdiocese of Detroit, where the Church Militant is headquartered, compelled the outlet more than a decade ago to stop using Catholic in its name and has repeatedly denounced the group. By the way, I am reading, once again, for purposes of reminding you what we're doing here, from Salon. White nationalists get religion. On the far-right fringe, Catholics and racists forge a movement, by Catherine Joyce and Ben Lorber, published about a week ago on May 12th. So, anyway, just to give you an idea of who we're dealing with and establish the connection of Marjorie Taylor Greene to the group as well. But let's see, I'll continue on here. Last November, the outlet hosted a noisy day-long rally in the Baltimore waterfront to protest the annual meeting of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops next door. Church Militant's MC for the event, fallen alt-right star turned Groyper leader Milo Yiannopoulos, who joined Church Militant as a regular contributor in 2021 after declaring himself ex-gay, and directed the roughly 1,200-person audience to chant, "Lock them up," at the bishops gathered nearby. It was he, in fact, who reportedly arranged for Marjorie Taylor Greene to speak at Fuentes' AFPAC 3 in February, the very same one that the author of the previous article was barred from entering. Well, there's more figures that are familiar to us. Another Groyper leader speaking at Church Militant's Baltimore rally was anti-immigrant pundit Michelle Malkin. In case you were wondering whether she was still alive, she is, and this is where she's working. The day after speaking at the White Nationalist American Renaissance Conference, Malkin told the Church Militant crowd that USCCB aid to immigrants and the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops, that is, aid to immigrants and refugees had the ultimate goal of fundamentally transforming the United States of America and destroying the historic American nation. White nationalist language that echoes the Great Replacement conspiracy theory, according to which whites in the U.S. are being replaced by non-white immigration. Many of Church Militant's targets are within the Catholic Church itself. It has run articles exposing bishops who are being exposed because they are registered Democrats, called the first black cardinal in the American Church African Queen, demanded that Pope Francis resign, and vowed to use its claimed network of hundreds of priests and church staff, as well as thousands of lay activists, to dig up dirt on any bishops who, quote, go after a good priest. But much of the site's writing and advocacy is more directly political, as when it compared the Black Lives Matter movement to fascism, attacked the Catholic bishops' support for immigrants as a numbers game meant to, quote, shore up a shrinking, shriveling church, and in 2020 declared that every Democratic leader in the country, that's a quote, should be, quote, immediately arrested and imprisoned for their role in the pandemic public health restrictions. Oh boy. I mean, I'd like to call for that. Why not? Let's do it. Not Democrats, of course, but I sometimes wonder what it would be like to organize a parallel system in the opposite direction. Church Militant was such an avid supporter of Trump's re-election campaign that it repeatedly warned readers that if Joe Biden were elected, Catholics would be, quote, identified, hunted down, declared illegal, gunned down in the streets, or herded onto trains heading for the camps. Of course, just like everything else, every accusation is a confession. Oh, wow. Just another example of more of the same, I suppose. We'll return to this dismal news after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Phew, all right, well, I still want to tell you a little bit more about this, although I don't really necessarily want to read through the entirety of the rest of the article, but just to give you some sense of where they're going from here. But I also wanted to let you know that, give you some of the names of the people who are tied up in this thing. Michelle Malkin, still alive and working with Church Militant, which I guess is something of like a website, I guess is perhaps how they're actually organized. Milo Yiannopoulos as well, tied to any number of other ridiculous ultra-right figures, but something to keep an eye on. Let's see, where were we when we left off with the reading before the break? Church Militant is widely considered, even among many conservative Catholics, as so outrageous and aggressive that it is best ignored, and that is usually a dangerous sign. But as Commonweal's Paul Moses reported, that outlet and the fellow traveling LifeSite News together garnered nearly 10 million visits to their alt-right news websites during the last 3 months of 2020, helping to spread bogus election conspiracy claims to a huge Catholic audience. On January 6th, 2021, both Church Militant and its staff celebrated the riot at the U.S. Capitol, tweeting images of pro-Trump protesters carrying Catholic iconography and declaring the rioters patriots. The outlet has made common cause with many of the most controversial figures on the right, promoting interviews with Roger Stone, who just the other day was having a video circulate online of him insisting that there was a literal satanic portal visible to anyone who looked at the White House today. And it opened when Joe Biden came in. And I mean, just about the craziest stuff you could ever hope to hear from anybody. And coming out of, Stone's always been crazy and controversial, but I think this represents a new turn for him. Satanic portals, anyway. So who else is involved? Joseph Flynn, the brother of QAnon hero Michael Flynn. Gab founder and CEO Andrew Torba, and Steve Bannon, of course, who was to be the keynote speaker at Church Militant's Baltimore rally, although he ultimately didn't attend because he was arrested that week and charged with contempt of Congress. Beyond its Baltimore rally, the organization routinely platforms voices connected to the Groyper movement as well. Multiple church militant articles have featured Torba and YouTube streamer John Doyle, who are both longstanding Fuentes allies, and were featured as speaker and special guest, respectively, at AFPAC 3. Church militant founder Michael Voris recently appeared on a show hosted by a white nationalist former Senate candidate, Lauren Witzke, another prominent Fuentes ally. I believe I've seen her videos circulating on Twitter too. Just a week after the Capitol insurrection, Voris interviewed another Fuentes acolyte, January 6th planner Ali Alexander, about his then recent conversion to Catholicism, as well as their shared sense in the immediate aftermath of the Capitol riot that dying an honorable death is an awesome thing. I encourage you, by the way, to get started on that one immediately. Alexander said he had come to realize there was a, quote, war between the church and the people who have infiltrated the church, and Voris recounted attending several of Alexander's Stop the Steal protests in Michigan, including one at the state capitol in Lansing. That rally was led by Nick Fuentes and John Doyle and celebrated on Church Militant's Twitter account. These points of overlap exemplify how the white nationalist movement and the Catholic right are both drawing together and influencing each other. But it is in the youth movement and on the streets where the most significant collaboration is now unfolding. Although, I got to tell you, it sounds a lot like cosplay to me, and certainly fantasizing about, having historical context that doesn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what motivates people like this. So it's dangerous and you got to watch it. We are intensely trying to cultivate the youth, Voris said in a February 2022 video entitled CM Youth Movement, claiming that 24 of Church Militant's 63 employees are under the age of 30. They have employees, which means they have money, which is crazy. As men, it's really important that we act, professed one young church militant staffer in the video. We can't just sit by and watch our civilization and church collapse into a cesspool of degeneracy. Voris took note when Fuentes held AFPAC 3, praising the conference as where all the youthful red future energy is and the real struggle for the heart and soul of the conservative movement. A struggle, Voris said, echoing Fuentes' framing, which will dictate the future of the Republican Party and to a large extent the nation. In a subsequent video entitled Young Conservative Catholics, Voris drove the point home, bemoaning the collapse of the American empire. Here's where we get into this cosplay stuff. Voris compared contemporary young Catholics to the, quote, first young Romans who, in the wake of the collapse of the Roman Empire in the 4th century AD, conquered the barbarians and instituted a new Catholic civilization. Just like in the days of Rome, as it collapsed, Voris explained, there was a generation of 20-somethings that beheld it. So too now here in the U.S. in the coming years. But beginning now, what must be fought for is Catholic truth. Straight up, terrible, glorious Catholic truth. He went on to say that the establishment conservatism has betrayed the cause, and it is the young more than anyone else who must understand the real war here. Fuentes and Yiannopoulos both shared Voris's video on Telegram, with the caption framing it as a direct appeal to the Groypers. The cry, "Christ is King," must ring loud across the land. Church militants Michael Voris on America First. Well, anyway, that's what they're on about these days. They have a second installment, by the way, in this series. Again, in Salon, of course. And again, the writers Catherine Joyce and Ben Lorber. Traditional, that in quotes, traditional Catholics and white nationalist Groypers forge a new far-right youth movement. This time again illustrated by the picture of the people in front of the church in New York, counter-demonstrating on the abortion rally, but illustrating the confusion of what's going on here. The caption obviously mislabels the people here. Anti-abortion activists and church members gather outside of a Catholic church in downtown Manhattan to voice their support for a woman's right to choose. No, they were there to protest against the people who were there to voice their support for the woman's right to choose. But okay, a mistake, obviously. I think they'd admit that much. But there's the guy in the fire department fleece who stands there, and he prominently places himself in front of the group and takes on the role of trying to antagonize the other demonstrators by telling them, exactly the most outrageous thing that he could think of. I control your body. That's right. There is no my body, my choice. It's your body, my choice. You're going to have my baby. Nothing could be more insulting to yell at people, but he's looking for a fight. And if he gets one, in his mind, so much the better. So what is in this second installment? The first paragraph piqued my interest just because we read about it yesterday, but now I begin to understand it a little bit better. The activist wing of Church Militant, Church Militant is an activist group of people, I'm sure, but they consider that, okay, well, we're just the intellectual thought leaders, Church Militant. We just write the ideas. The activists, not unlike what goes on at Daily Kos, right? We write things, but there's an activism section, so they kind of lift that organization from us and take it forward, which is ironic because, I don't know, for various reasons. One, those things rarely succeed. And two, but maybe that's why, the Democratic billionaires don't fund people moving to the Western states to take over, because things that copy the other side's movements rarely work in general. But okay, we should try it anyhow. But yesterday I was a little bit puzzled about the idea of a activist wing of Church Militant, which called itself the Resistance Network, and it now rings a bell. Yes, the copy thing. Just as people declared themselves to be, resistance when Trump was first elected into office, and they stayed more or less organized as resistance. They loved that label. Here they are co-opting it and trying to reverse it and use it in the same way, as is frequently the case with a lot of things that end up being chiefly associated with right-wing ideology. The fake news stuff was originally people labeling right-wing fake news as what it was, and they just reversed the field on it. And here they're trying to do the same thing with resistance. Anyway, as of 2020, the outlet said it boasted more than 5,000 members, this Church Militant, and claimed to have launched groups in almost every diocese of the U.S. Last June, the group claimed that its protest of a church vaccine drive in Southern California forced the drive to end 3 hours early. The same month, members of the Resistance Network hosted an affidavit signing drive at Church Militant headquarters outside Detroit, joining with other right-wing Michigan groups in demanding a forensic audit of the 2020 election and holding a protest rally on the Capitol steps. More recently, as resistance leader Joe Gallagher outlined at Church Militant rally last November, the group has picketed local bishops, like the Westboro Baptists, brought ex-gay conservative firebrand Milo Yiannopoulos to the Penn State campus to advocate praying the gay away, and protested at a Dallas memorial for George Floyd to bear witness to a real racial injustice, the mass slaughter of the unborn, which disproportionately affects minorities. Now the Resistance Network is looking to recruit directly from the Groypers, the largely young far-right followers of white nationalist Nick Fuentes. On May 2nd, Gallagher interviewed Dalton Clodfelter, remember him, the same Groyper leader who celebrated the Catholic counter-protester at the New York's Basilica of St. Patrick's Old Cathedral last weekend, introducing resistance viewers to Fuentes' website Cozy TV as a new streaming platform for a lot of awesome younger conservatives, i.e. the ones banned from YouTube. Gallagher hyped the reported 1,200 attendees at Fuentes' AFPAC 3 gathering, saying that obviously America First is booming. You guys have gotten huge. You guys go for the jugular every single time. He continued, you go for the truth. You're not afraid to hide it at all. And that's one of the most respectable aspects of America First, is you guys don't really care, and that's cool. It's really not, but okay. Clodfelter, who told Gallagher it was Yiannopoulos who first introduced him to Church Militant, pitched America First in a language that his new audience was likely eager to hear. It's not like the alt-right, because that is not even cool anymore, even if you wanted it to be. And it's also not like normie neocon conservatism. It's Christian nationalist. They actually love to embrace that. He went on, the message of America First is tied directly to the Word of God. It isn't. And spreading Christianity throughout our nation where it's lacking. Everything we do is a spiritual battle. We're fighting demons. We're fighting Satan. Clodfelter emphasized the need to grow the viewer base of Cozy TV, explaining that a majority of white young Zoomer men would just love Cozy TV. The problem is they don't know where to go to get it. And that's because it sucks and no one ever heard of it, and everything on it is BS and no one gives a crap. But, all right. I mean, that's a major hurdle to have to overcome, don't you think? Clodfelter went on to draw a particular connection between the Groyper movement and Catholicism, saying he'd never considered joining the church before getting involved with America First. I met people who are truly devout, truly living by the word, and they weren't hypocrites. They were. They were representing Catholicism so well for me, I was like, wow, the least I could do is go to Mass and do some research. Now, he said, he's studying for the rite of Christian initiation of adults, the formal process by which unbaptized adults become Catholics, and he says he understands why Fuentes says of the Groypers, this is sort of a Catholic movement. Since then, Resistance has continued to brand itself to appeal to Groypers. One advertisement for Resistance posted on Gab last week featured the America First and Cozy TV logos, as well as a style of sunglasses popularized by Fuentes as part of last year's White Boy Summer Groyper branding campaign. Yeah, the whole something something summer thing has become a hot thing too. Meanwhile, as reported in part 1 of this series, Clodfelter attempted to mobilize Groypers to attend Resistance counter-protests of pro-choice demonstrations planned for the weekend in cities across the country. As of Friday, the events appear to have been removed from Resistance's website, while on Telegram, Clodfelter noted late Wednesday night that most of the counter-protests had been postponed, writing, working with church militant on this to make sure we are doing this in the most organized and safe way. Clodfelter still claims the Groypers will rally in Nashville. Not every church militant staffer appears thrilled with the growing crossover, however. Oh, a split. What do you know? In July of 2021, Church militant executive producer Christine Niles remarked on Twitter that the America First movement, which has great things to say, is ill-served by Fuentes' open anti-Semitism. The unfortunate obsession with the Jews will sink the America First movement, and that's truly a shame. Some audience members have pushed back as well. Was a supporter of CM, but no more, commented one viewer in February of 2020 after Voris ran an interview with Fuentes ally Michelle Malkin. I'm all for borders, I'm all for preserving Western culture, but I'm not down with Holocaust denial. In emailed comments on Wednesday, Voris told Salon, church militant might partner with anyone in a particular effort to achieve a limited and shared goal. In this particular case, Roe. Yes, church militant will link arms with almost anyone who decries the horror of babies. You know where this is going. Voris noted that church militant did not attend the America First conference in February and has no first-hand knowledge of what was said or presented. However, he continued, it should not be surprising that two or more organizations that hold general views with the current cultural crisis would experience some crossover of ideas. So he's trying to pretend it's an accident. All right, Groypers are everywhere. I'm going to go to this section, including on church militant staff. It is counterintuitive, to say the least, that an ostensibly faith-based organization is embracing a movement so explicitly bigoted as the Groypers. Fuentes has engaged in elaborate jokes denying the Holocaust, praised Hitler, and told viewers on one live stream show that, frankly, I'm getting pretty sick of world Jewry running the show. To name just a few examples of his virulent anti-Semitism, Fuentes has disparaged African-American voter outreach as attempts to flood the zone with N-word votes, called for total Aryan victory, rejected race mixing because people should stick with their own kind, bragged that he's made misogyny cool again, celebrated domestic violence against women, and much more. Just all the things, celebrating the violence against women, obviously intended to provoke a reaction. On his Thursday night live stream show, Fuentes responded to the claims made in part 1 of Salon's investigation. You're damn right the Groypers are forming an alliance with the Catholics, he exclaimed. And you're right, we have a plan, and we're going to take the Republican Party and we're going to drag it against its will back through the doors of the church and to the altar, and we're going to baptize it. Clodfelter, meanwhile, extolled his audience to show our love and support for Church Militant. These guys are strong. These guys are determined. Yes, we're collaborating in this effort to combat Satanism in America. We are. Groypers are everywhere. Sure, they really aren't. But anyway, while Niles appeared ambivalent about America First or about its leader, her colleague, 27-year-old Joseph Enders, the dude, right, is a full-fledged Groyper, variously named as a reporter, senior producer, and associate producer at Church Militant. Enders is a fixture on Church Militant's evening news and a regular contributor to churchmilitant.com. Enders didn't always support white nationalism. In 2018, he self-identified as an Augustinian nationalist. These guys love their terminology. Claimed affiliation with the Proud Boys and uploaded interviews to YouTube where he argued with white nationalist leaders like Richard Spencer and James Alsop. The philosophy of the right, he told Spencer in June of 2018, should be animated by a people that focus inward on preserving the traditions of Western culture. But race should not be a consideration in this. I think we should only judge people based on how they exercise their will. But by late 2019, when the Groypers entered the national spotlight with a series of public stunts challenging conservative leaders on college campuses, Enders had changed his tune. I don't think anybody is saying we're preserving our race because our race is better, he explained when he called in to the live streaming show of Proud Boys founder Gavin McInnes on McInnes's Censored.tv platform. Everybody's got their own platform. Defenders of the Groypers' emphasis on white demographic replacement, the conspiracy theory that white Americans are being replaced by non-white immigration, Enders told McInnes, "You're into fashion, so you'll understand this analogy. When we look at a country, there are people that wear the country the best, and that's usually the founding stock of the country." Garbage. Anyway, since joining Church Militant staff in 2020, Enders' embrace of the Groypers has continued apace. Nick is a mass-attending Catholic, unheard of at his age. There's millions of them, of course. Enders posted on Facebook in April of 2021, "I can't help but like Nick. The right needs more of his trollish humor to root out the grifters. It's supremely entertaining." A year later, his support was even more pronounced. "I hear this Nick Fuentes dude is pretty based." He tweeted on April 3rd, 2022, "I have to say I support his efforts to put America first." You get the idea. There's more. I don't really feel like I need to read the rest of it, but you probably should spend some time with it, get an idea for it, and then you should go watch Sword of Gideon, the old movie about the assassination of the Munich terrorists, and hope for a similar program here in the United States to get rid of these Groypers one day. Oh, is that controversial? Oh no, is that going to make me famous? Is somebody going to contribute millions of dollars to support my platform now? Gosh, I can't see why they wouldn't be discouraged from doing what they're doing. Or anyway, well, it'll never happen here on this side, or whether for me or anybody else. But I do sometimes wonder what it would be like to have that kind of broad-based support for something where you were supposed to be outrageous and confrontational. I don't know. All right, well, let's see. A few minutes remain in today's program. There are probably 10 to 12,000 other things that I meant to share with you, but haven't had the opportunity to do so. There's lots of good writing has been produced over the past couple of days reacting to the Buffalo shooting, the Great Replacement Theory. The Guardian has a piece with the intriguing headline of "Fox News Suddenly Goes Quiet on Great Replacement Theory After the Buffalo Shooting." Intriguing editorial entry from not always totally together David Leonhardt, writing about the right's violence problem. The Buffalo killings are part of a pattern, he says. Most extremist violence in the U.S. comes from the political right. It's nice of him to, recognize that it's not a both sides issue, I guess, but I'm still not back in line entirely in any sense with David Leonhardt. He does a lot of dumb things. Let's see. There's, of course, an entry in the same genre from the Washington Post, which carries the Margaret Sullivan column, a racist theory drove the Buffalo tragedy. The Murdochs thrive on it. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, bringing this thing up a level and hanging it around the necks of the Murdochs. Wise to do. And I'm sure, according to the reviews I saw of it on Twitter and the discussion of it, well done at that. Let's see. A few other items I thought of sharing. Let's see. Oh, yes. Robert Costa tweeting this morning about Kathy Barnett. Well, we'll see whether the primary settles it today, but among the Republican candidates for Senate in Pennsylvania, which prompted one of my earlier comments and comparisons, the idea being that Republicans running for office in order to backfill or excuse their previous crimes or the crimes that they commit on their way to office. That's what inspired me to think of that today. But Costa tweeting Barnett to CBS News on January 6th, 2021, when she was photographed walking among Proud Boys after Trump's rally. Her comment here being, we prayed, we walked, we laughed, we met new friends. Like, the insurrection was really the friends we made along the way. Kind of weird language. But he goes on to tweet some more, saying earlier tonight, and this would have been last night, CBS News showed Barnett the two photos of her walking among the Proud Boys to see if she could offer more clarity on her intentions and movements on that day. She is now, of course, seeking a seat in the Senate, which has a major role in certifying presidential elections. He helpfully points out that led me to believe, yes, here running for the purpose of committing that crime of carrying out Trump's auto golpe coup and then putting herself inside the Senate if she can in order to continue the cover-up and continue to insist that there was nothing wrong with that, and there certainly won't be any investigation of it at any point. Anyway, just interesting to see. Of course, she faces the primary voters today, and we'll see what can be sorted out. And of course, if she loses her primary, she will doubtless call into question the results of the primary voting. I assume that's only consistent with what she's been up to so far. Anyway, got that to in and on the record, so I think you can poke around a little bit and see what else there is for you to enhance your reading with here. Let's see. Rather than try and dive into any of them, I'll give you a couple other headlines, things that might be fun to look in on. In Georgia, from the Washington Post, this piece, Georgia County under scrutiny after claim of post-election breach. An effort by a county official to investigate the 2020 contest underscores a growing threat to election security, experts say. Remember that this was, of course, happening similarly in Colorado, where that one election official was caught breaking into the storage facility. By the way, she has recently been ruled ineligible to administer the elections in, was it Mesa County, Colorado, by the judge handling her case. So that's of some interest. I mean, she's actually, it's a good model perhaps for things in the future. If they succeed, Republicans, in taking over a lot of these jobs where it will become their task to administer the elections, supposedly to do it fairly, but instead it's their declared platform to do it unfairly. Perhaps in some places you'll be able to find members of the judiciary to step in and disallow their administration of the election. But not all of them are going to be foolish enough to break into the storage facilities and steal the hard drives out of the voting machines between now and then. Or will they? Emma Brown and Amy Gardner thinks perhaps they might. The story going on down in Georgia, just to give you a flavor of it before we exit for the day. A former election supervisor in rural Coffee County, do they just say it as Coffee? Coffee County, Georgia, like the drink, right? Has told the Washington Post that she opened her offices to a businessman active in the election denier movement to help investigate results she did not trust in the weeks after President Donald Trump's 2020 defeat. Trump had carried the conservative county by 40 points, but elections supervisor Misty Hampton, another name that we'll have to track, said she remained suspicious of Joe Biden's win in Georgia and wanted to undo it, essentially. Hampton made a video that went viral soon after the election, claiming to show that Dominion voting systems machines, the ones used in her county, could be manipulated, which would, of course, be her fault, by the way. But, oh, hey, let's ignore that. She said in interviews that she hoped the Georgia businessman who visited later, Scott Hall, and others who accompanied him could identify vulnerabilities and prove that this election was not done true and correct. Boy, that should be fun. So just you want to put that on your radar so you can be aware of that. I'll dig up for you the latest news from Mesa County. And let's see, probably a couple of other things to share with you as well. I'll hold the Wisconsin news for a day we can perhaps pay closer attention to it. Also out of Colorado, a fun piece in Mother Jones the other day. Lauren Boebert's American Dream, just sort of documenting her on again, off again, half-assed success with Shooter's Grill and outbreaks of foodborne poisoning, etc. that go along with it, and the hypocrisy that is her life in general. Okay, well, we'll scoop up all of that. I'll see if I have a note to myself somewhere, if I can see if I can find the Roger Stone video about him screaming about satanic portals. And what did I need to find you? Oh, yes, right, the Mesa County stuff. All right, all that and more coming up when Scott gets the links from me and is able to actually produce today's summary of the show. And, of course, those stories, elaboration on them, and ones we've missed, coming to you starting tomorrow when Greg returns.
From networksradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
But maybe you don't want to wait until tomorrow. But you can't wait. You want to continue on with this storyline immediately. Well, you can do that, of course. The West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Justice Putnam comes up next right here on Netroots Radio. And he's got, well, more of the same. And, of course, branching off into a million different directions, as is his wont, coming up next.